It's scientifically one of the most relaxing sights and sounds in the world. Water and its ever-present dance captivates us. We want to be on it, near it, or in it, despite its many dangers.
We all have some experience with the water, and we all have a relationship with it, whether or not it's good or bad, whether or not it's, you know, fearful or joyful.
New York Times contributor Bonnie Tsui is squarely in the joyful category. She swims or surfs on a daily basis near her home in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's part of her pedigree. Her parents met in a swimming pool in Hong Kong. Swimming medals decorated her childhood. She still races in the masters category, but she swims for a different reward these days.
It's something that our connection over this thing that we love, we get both of those things. We get the community and we also get the time with ourselves when we're underwater. And I think it's a strange sport, right? Like when you think about it, that it's not just all or one, but all one or the other.
A sport, a recreational activity second only to walking in the U.S., a survival skill, a beneficial exercise, a moving meditation. Why we swim has many answers. Joy takes us on a journey around the world and through time to investigate them, mixing in did you know science and history tidbits with unbelievable stories of record breakers.
She's just a phenomenal competitor and someone who I wanted to get into her head.
And survivors.
He ended up swimming 6 kilometers over 6 hours in 41-degree water in Iceland and survived to tell the tale.
In this conversation, Joy talks about the extreme research she did for the book, including swimming sans wetsuit in 56-degree water.
I went into the shower at the Dolphin Club here in San Francisco, and I was cranking the water to the, hot, and I could not get warm. That's when I started to lose control of my extremities, just like uncontrollable shaking.
And how that wasn't even the most nerve-wracking part of finishing this book.
Oh boy, I was scared.
Plus, words to swim by from a well-known athlete on swimming through the blankness, that revitalizing meditative state Joy chases.
I really love what she said. I remember this really vividly. She said it's like a check-in with yourself, like a status update, but only for yourself.
Bonnie Tsui, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Angie.
So I know you go for early morning swims. Does that mean you've already been out today?
That's funny you ask. I actually went for an early morning surf this morning. It was pretty magical. The whales were out. There was a rainbow. There were seals. There were beautiful little peelers. So that's why I look so shiny and bright, I think.
How has it been for you during this quarantine? Because I know swimming is such a huge part of who you are. Have you been able to get out?
I have. Well, we chatted a little bit before this about pools. The pools have been closed since the beginning of pandemic and lockdown. So that's very sad. That's sad, especially for my kids who are 7 and 9 and they're on a swim team, and they just miss that immersion and getting tired and swimming on swim team with their friends. And yesterday we went to the ocean and we took the boys there, and they were just in heaven, just playing in the waves. Could not get enough. It was freezing and they did not care. They would have been there all afternoon if we had turned into popsicles. But that's the way kids are, and that says something to me. It's just a reminder of how we are so kind of wired to water makes us want to play and makes us feel free. And I think that seeing that, especially in this time, in this very strange moment in our lives where things are on hold, we've been stilled for so long that to be in motion and to be in a medium that lets you do that, I think was very special for them. So I was so happy to see them like that.
Oh, well, and I think I saw somewhere that seeing an adult play like that in a pool was kind of part of the inspiration for you writing this. Is that right?
Yeah, I see that in the mornings when I do my laps at the pool, and people at that hour tend to, they go do their workout and then they go to work or they go about their day. And even then, when those swimmers are so focused on their workout, they come out and they can't resist a little dive down, can't resist a little twirl or flip or something underwater, and that to me says something about the water, says something to me about what swimming does for us. It keeps us in that fluid, playful state, and I miss that for our kids, and I miss that for myself. Although I have been able to get out in the bay and in the ocean in the Pacific here, but it's not the same sort of restful, meditative state as lap swimming is. Of course, it's just that is a very safe and circumscribed space that where you can really let your mind and your body go on autopilot. And I think just being in wild water, it's good that you get uh, very acutely attuned to what's going on, of course, but it's just a different kind of swimming.
Well, one of the things that I really enjoyed about your book is there are some incredible people that you introduce us to and incredible experiences, but then you went and did several of them. I mean, diving for the abalone, swimming in Iceland, 3.7 miles, and then going into San Francisco Bay in 56-degree water without a wetsuit. Why did you feel that you needed to experience all those things in writing this?
That's a great question. I think that with my journalism, with my magazine and newspaper journalism, and that's what I normally am doing when I'm not writing books, I think there's something so valuable about participating in it on some level. Certainly not with all stories, but with something like swimming, and certainly with a book about swimming, I think that it's important for the writer, the narrator, the person who's guiding you through to have some sensorially rich and acute visceral understanding of what it is that the people who are in the book are doing and what they face. And so for me, it's part of the research. It's part of accessing the language and the experiences to talk about them in a real and compelling way, in a vivid way.
Well, I assume do you do the no wetsuit swim in the bay very often?
I don't do it very often now. I did do it quite a few times during the course of writing the book, and I did learn then with that, by doing that our bodies do acclimate to that water, that you do feel different from one time to the next, to the next, to the next. And that was something that I never thought that I would be able to understand, but it really is true. And then now, when I started swimming in the bay, of course. See, I guess it was now a few months ago. Again, like when I couldn't swim in the pool, and I thought about not wearing a wetsuit, but then really quickly decided that it was the right thing to do was to wear the wetsuit, because I was not doing that bay swimming on a regular basis, and I didn't want to get into trouble out there and have any issue with anyone having to save me or having to help me move through some kind of hypothermic state. So I think that just that sense of being responsible when you're out there, and I think that's a big part of being an open water swimmer, is that you have to educate yourself on your boundaries. So it's been I want it to be clear that I am not the be all end all of open water swimmers. All of these folks at the Dolphin Club, South End Rowing Club, all these wonderful polar, basically they are polar bears. They're year-round polar bear swimmers. It's incredible.
I want to talk to you about them, but I mean, because you even experience what they call, I'd never heard of it, it's after drop.
Uh-huh.
So explain what that is.
Sure. So most people know what hypothermia is. So your body temperature starts dropping, your core temperature starts dropping into a range where you cannot maintain your internal body heat, and so it's dangerous because then your that blood can start circulating to other places and cause all kinds of havoc. When you are swimming in cold water, you may feel fine and you may not be hypothermic when you're swimming. And when you exit the water, your body temperature can continue to drop even after you've left the water. And so I experienced this, and I had been told about this from the swimmer Kim Chambers, and I went into the shower at the Dolphin Club here in San Francisco, and I was cranking the water to the, hot, 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 and I could not get warm. That's when I started to lose control of my extremities, just like uncontrollable shaking. And knowing that, okay, let's say that hit when I was out in the water, I mean, that would have been a dangerous situation. Certainly, I was very fortunate to have so many knowledgeable swimmers kind of preparing me for how to handle it, and then the next time I went, I did not experience that after drop. It was so interesting how our bodies are then, I swam longer the second time and it just didn't happen. And it wasn't particularly, the temperature wasn't much different from the first time either. But it is interesting to observe how our bodies can adapt.
Well, and you even talk about, I mean, there are studies showing that cold water swimming can be beneficial even, right? That, I mean, obviously if you have certain health risks, it's not, but
Right. Yes. Well, that there are studies that show with cold water immersion that you have just this huge boost in like your dopamine levels, and of course your metabolism is just jacked up, and all of these really fascinating things are happening physiologically to you. And then of course, cardiovascular, like if you have any heart issues, there's concern about that because it does temporarily raise your blood pressure. So, but over time, it lowers your blood pressure. So through swimming and exercise in cold water. So it's a funny balance of like all these variables that we are just really beginning to learn about in some detail.
you mentioned Kim Chambers, and that's one of the characters who I just felt like in reading the book that I got to know her, and she sounds like a pistol.
That's a great word for her. She is. She's so spirited, so alive, so just open to the world, and so many crazy things have happened to her. There are more crazy things that have happened to her than should happen to any one person in one lifetime. And she manages to power through them with such grace and resilience that I really admire her, and she's just the most lovely person. For those of you who aren't familiar with her, she was the first woman to swim from the Farallones to San Francisco, which is a 30-mile journey in open water back from the Pacific, from the islands where, there's great white sharks around there, all kinds of water animals, marine mammals, and hazards. And she swam those 30 miles to San Francisco and became the first woman to do that solo swim. And she has done all other manner of amazing swims, but she only kind of became a swimmer after almost losing her leg in just like a freak accident, and then started swimming to rehab herself. And her story is just, to me, really one of the most special ones in the book, in that it sort of shows us what we are capable of and how water can be healing and how swimming can change many of our lives, but this one woman's life just really gave her a new, she calls it like the day that she first went into the bay. It was her rebirth. It was her entry into a new phase of her life.
You became quite close with her and several of the characters from writing this book, right?
Yes, I did. I think that you are alluding to Goodliger Frid Thorson.
Good, you said it so that I didn't have to.
Yeah, exactly. I knew I could read. I see you. So Goodliger Frid Thorson is an Icelandic fisherman who, in 1984, his fishing vessel capsized and everyone on board perished except for him. And he ended up swimming 6 kilometers over 6 hours in 41-degree water in in Iceland, and survived to tell the tale. And part of that is because he has a body fat that resembles that of a seal's, in that it's 2 to 3 times normal human thickness and more solid. And so, to kind of follow up on our conversation about hypothermia, it was able to keep his core body temperature stable for the 6 hours of swimming. And think about it, for a normal person, the rest of us humans, 20 to 30 minutes in that temperature water, we would be done for. And so he was able to maintain his body temperature as he was swimming. He's also clearly a very good swimmer to be able to swim in 6 hours in this in these crazy conditions, and make it to his home island. He followed the lighthouse, the light of where he's from, this island called Heme in Vestmannaeyjar, which is the Westman Islands off of the coast of Maine, Iceland. And as you can imagine, Thorson, Gudliga Thorson, became something of a curiosity to many, many people around the world. I mean, Johnny Carson called him one to come on the show, and he wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to publicize, safety measures that he thought should be in place for the fishing in general, for the fishing industry. And, he lost his friends. And before everyone drowned, they talked about, if one of them would survive and make it, they had to tell what happened. And so he did that. He fulfilled an obligation that he felt very strongly about, but also, eventually it's a tragedy that you want to deal with personally and then privately, and you want to move on and live your life. And so he's been doing that, and he had not been really talking to journalists for many years. And I wanted to respect that desire at the same time that I really wanted to hear from him, not just from people around him or about him. And I felt, a journalistic draw to at least ask. And so I sent him a letter. And then I Google translated it into Icelandic, and then I mailed it to him. And he wrote back, and we began writing to each other. I am very thankful that he wrote back, and we have become great friends, and our families have become great friends. And, I think that that friendship means a lot to me, and I think it means a lot to him too, and I'm grateful for that. And sometimes writing and journalism can allow those connections to happen, and they're very meaningful. We try, I think, on some level to be somewhat distanced from our sources or our stories, but we're human, and we can't be, and we shouldn't be, because I think then you lose the humanity in a story. And I think in this moment in time, that is even more important than ever.
Has he read the book? Has he had a chance?
Yeah, I actually sent it to him early on, and oh boy, I was scared.
Me too. Yeah.
Really nervous. And I had, we had talked, we had stayed in touch throughout the entire process. But I think you just never know, and you never know how someone will react to seeing themselves on the page. He read it, and he said something. He made a joke about, like, he wasn't sure if he understood one sentence correctly, and then he said, "Oh, but maybe it's just my English." But that I think that he felt I was transparent with what I wanted to do, and tried to earn his trust as much as I could, and then he had to decide, and then he did.
The other person that I loved hearing about was Dara Torres. Because, to watch her on the screen, then you got to speak with her, and she's one of your heroes, right?
She's just
she's my hero. She's incredible.
I remember watching her in those games, her fifth games, where she was just touched out for that 15-meter freestyle, and I just remember thinking, this is her fifth Olympics. She's 41 years old. She's seeded first in the final, and it was just heartbreaking that she lost by 1/100th of a second. It was just brutal. But that she's just a a phenomenal competitor and someone who I wanted to get into her head. I wanted her to invite me in and talk about what it is that has had driven her to, unretire 3 times and go back. She was, I think what is it, that in her first Olympics, Michael Phelps wasn't even born yet.
Right.
That's just crazy, and they were swimming together, I think, in Beijing.
Right.
And so just unreal.
Yeah. So, I mean, what was it like for you to, that initial phone call? Were you, I mean, was it, as a journalist, you get to really have access
Yeah.
to some incredible.
She was so funny because she immediately put me at ease because she's like, I'm in the car, I'm driving, and then she's talking and so she was very normal. At the same time, she's very abnormal. And
Right.
so in that first phone call, I remember she was driving, and it was great because we were talking about what you think about when you're swimming. And she said, oh, I'm doing like a million different things at once usually. And it's great because like when I get in the water, sometimes I think about all those things, but then sometimes I just think about nothing. And that it allows her to, I really love what she said. I remember this really vividly. She said it's like a check-in with yourself, like a status update, but only for yourself.
Yeah.
And how great is that? Like it's to you and only you. And certainly I think when she's training or competing, that's a different kind of frame of mind. You're thinking about laps, you're thinking about technique, you're thinking about what it is that you're trying to improve. But I think just when she's swimming, sometimes she just becomes untethered. And I really liked getting both, viewpoints where she's such the most driven ultimate competitor, and yet she's still able to find the blankness. I think that some of us really, it's very rare, I think, these days to have that. And she explained it really well.
There's so many things in this book that I felt like it's the did you know moments. One of the did you know sections of the book that I found fascinating was kind of the evolution of the swim strokes and the samurai swimming, which I didn't even know existed. So interesting.
So for those who don't know, which is probably many of you, basically Nihon Eiho, which is the Japanese swimming martial art. You are a student, you're a pupil under a master, you train up through, like you can get different belts, you can achieve different skill levels, and it's like in this cap, it's signified by like a stripe or some kind of marking on your cap. It's really interesting. So how it all began was hundreds of years ago during the Japanese feudal period, where there would be samurai clans defending different parcels of land, and inevitably some of those lands would be on the coast or on a river, on a lake or whatever. And in order to defend that coastline or that shoreline, they had to become pretty masterful with swimming and swimming skills. So, for example, in a place where it was on the ocean, that they would learn how to, sight through waves and swim in a way that they could keep their heads up and cut through the force of a breaking wave. Or in a very tranquil lake situation, that you could see enemies coming towards you, but also sneak up on them by swimming very, under the surface and not creating many ripples. And so these great strokes, like one of the signal ones in the book is about the Eggbeater kick, like from synchronized swimming, where you're treading water. That movement and that style of kicking is described in samurai scrolls from hundreds of years ago.
But they could and like shooting arrows and things while they're doing.
Right, so that you would be treading water and you could be still enough when you're doing it to shoot arrows, keep the arrows dry, and find their targets. So, and also wear, many pounds of armor while doing it. So in this, I went to Japan and I attended practice of Nihon Eiho with many masters in the pool, and it was extraordinary. One of the great things that I learned was that they were planning on demonstrating it at the Tokyo Olympics, and hopefully that will still happen next summer, where they can do that and really kind of reintroduce the martial art to the world. And because it has a lot of foundational history with the Japanese national swim team. So read the book and you'll find out about it.
I saw that you made a playlist for this book.
I did. I had kind of been collecting some songs over the course of writing the book that I really liked and would occasionally listen to, that had to do with swimming or water or immersion or some sense of the metaphor of water. And then, music is, I don't play music myself, but I am a great appreciator and listener of music, and I just love how it can create the mood. And so I listen to music when I'm writing very often, and that sometimes I would listen to these songs to put me into a place where I could access the things that I wanted to access, the emotions or the moods or the sort of just the, you get floated to a place where you can make connections.
Was there anything else that you did to kind of help in your writing?
I swam. I mean, it was really a funny thing to swim to write about it. For most of the book, I was, reporting on other people, reporting on scenes, reporting on things that happened, and that's something that's normal to me. But there's the final section of the book is flow, and so much of that section of the book is about ideas, it's about philosophy, it's about poetry, it's about our creative thought and how we access it to, apropos to our conversation now. And I would try to remember what it was that I would be thinking about when I would be swimming, or how it feels, or what it is that it's doing to me. And so I would go to the pool in the morning and I would get in and I would start swimming, and then I would say to myself, what am I thinking about now? I'm not taking notes on it, but I would sort of play, some ideas in my head, and it really was a very strange and wonderful experience. It's like this meta.
What's next for you? Did I see that you're writing a children's book?
I am. I have written the children's book, and so now the illustrator has been working on the illustrations, and like, your timing is impeccable, because just this morning I got the art and I'm just over the moon. I love it so much. So that's slated to come out next spring, and it's a book that's called Sarah and the Big Wave, and it's about the first woman to surf Mavericks, which is this big and famous surf break here in California.
An inspirational book for the smallest of us, encouraging that love for the deep blue something that is everything for Bonnie Tsui.
Back on the other side of the Pacific in San Francisco, Kim and I are swimming one morning when a seagull pegs me on the shoulder mid-freestyle stroke. I nearly jump out of my swimsuit in surprise, and then I call out to Kim. "I think a bird just hit me," I exclaim, incredulous. "It's their swimming pool," Kim answers, laughing. "We're just the fools who think we can swim in it."